We're back today with a rotator cuff strengthening progression that's going to teach an athlete how to stabilize their shoulder as they go through the throwing motion, and then how to maximize the magnitude of force that the posterior part of the rotator cuff, or the rotator cuff portion that's here, is able to produce during the throwing motion. Welcome back to Overhead Athletics. I'm Max. This is Austin. We're going to go through a progression here. We're going to start with our most basic exercise that we'll use in a standing position. We can do it in a split stance position where we're working on hamstring flexibility and straight front leg, or we can work on some lower extremity strength and get down into a lunge. For the purpose of this video, we're going to go into a slight lunge. So with an athlete, I'm going to rotate here, come up onto his toe. Perfect. Little bend in the knee. Once he's more advanced, we'll use those other progressions where we go into a split stance, lunge stance. From here, what we're going to do is we're going to take him not back here, but a little bit forward with his elbow. So straight out to the side, a little bit forward, 30 degrees forward. It's what we call the scapular plane. Now from there, he's going to do external rotation. So it's like a rotisserie chicken. I've heard that analogy from Eric Cressy online. Basically, this is a perfect piston that rotates. There's no deviation forward and backwards. A little bit. He's got to maintain a posterior pelvic tilt. Tuck that butt under. Nice and slow. He's going a little fast. That's the speed right there. He's going to start to feel it in the back here, maybe up into the shoulder a little bit. And what you see that Austin does really, really well is he maintains his elbow above his shoulder just slightly. Doesn't let it drop. So let him shake that out just a bit. Now, I'm going to have him jump into a lunge stance. So let's get farther out there. Farther, farther, farther. When we have a thrower, they're up on their back toe, straight back leg, bend their front knee. Shin is vertical here. I can have him go further into it for some quad strengthening. He's going to lean forward at the waist. So now, tuck your butt right there. So now he's actually forward, approximating the position where he's at during the throw. He's up in the same position of his arm. And from here, he does the same exercise. We got a little too much slack. Let's back up. Go this way just a tad. Okay, good. So now he's in that position again. Elbows out in front, chest is forward. He rotates. Don't do too much through the wrist. Keep your wrist flat, wrist flat. Good. Rotation all the way back. Hold at the end. Hold. Make sure your elbow's up. Now he's going to rotate his chest. He's not going to rotate through the arm back this way. He's going to rotate his chest back. Good. And back forward. Now we're going to do a better job. Keep that pelvis tight so the pelvis stays straight forward. We're doing it all through the thoracic spine. Lean forward a little bit. Lean forward a little bit. Good. You can see just how difficult this exercise is. Austin's done these a lot. Go. Relax that shoulder. Okay. Now keep that pelvis facing straight forward. Straighten that back leg. Don't pull back this way. Don't pull back this way. Good. So there's our progression. Sometimes we need to increase the magnitude of force that the rotator cuff muscles can produce. We see this all the time. Athletes come in with weak rotator cuff. So it's not always just about how these muscles can contract in the throwing motion or in a sequence, but also we have to consider that, hey, if these muscles can perform at 100% capacity, and for example, the teres minor and the infraspinatus, which we're working on in this video, can't perform at 100% capacity. We know they're at a deficit when it comes to strength at the end of the season. So now they're operating at 70, 60% of their maximum capacity because that's all the force they can produce. And we're expecting them to work properly in the sequence. We have to give them that ability, that magnitude of force that they're able to produce, and then we integrate it. So now we've increased the strength. We've made it more specific through adding rotation, which requires more co-contraction around the shoulder, but it also requires more challenging of the torso while I go through that. So now we've shown two progressions there, and now you can actually start to do some of the more advanced stuff. And rarely do we do this stuff in therapy because athletes simply aren't ready. And he's actually going to come into ER here. There's a lot of force into ER, and he's going to hold. I'll give him perturbations, and then we'll actually go through the exercise. So you're going to start with slack. You're going to have to start with slack. Little split stance, toes forward, once again, reinforcing proper positioning. Now he's here, he's in external rotation, and then I just give him little perturbations, and it's unpredictable as it's on there. So now he has to co-contract the rotator cuff, start to train it to use in a sequence, and I'm favoring one side compared to the other, but he has to use all portions of the shoulder through co-contraction, stabilization, in order to stabilize this load. And I can do a lot, and I can really challenge him, and this is particularly difficult. So then he loses a little bit, he relaxes. It's not how long he does it. We're working on 8 seconds approximately through an isometric there. And then what he's gonna do is he's gonna start with some slack and actually go through the range. Now, a thicker band, you say, oh, this is more difficult. And it's more resistance into ER. Step this way just ahead for me. More resistance into ER, but it's actually, go quicker. As he goes quicker, that thing starts bouncing around. It's intrinsically more difficult to control, and you see that he wants to compensate. So now he's got to continue working on it. Starting in a slackened position might not get as much range because it's particularly difficult to do. If I want to make it more difficult, I go back to our handy dandy green band here, and I go back and have him do the same exercises with the green band. And what you'll see is that this 2.5 pound weight now becomes much more difficult to control, and it will also pull down on the band a little more. So now I've altered the angle of pull just slightly. So what you see is it pulls down. Now he's going to go into that isometric once again, and you think easier, lighter band, but this thing bounces around a lot more in this position. Toe straight, and we can give him some manual cueing in combination with some isometric contraction and co-contraction around the shoulder. If I want to work on the anterior portion like subscap, we know it has to pre-contract prior to ER, although it does do lengthening in ER. Hold right there again. It does do some lengthening in ER through eccentric and then elastic contraction, but it has to be able to co-contract before that. So if I can give it some stimulation through an exercise like this, and this isn't what I do all the time because, like I said, majority of athletes need to improve the capacity of the muscle more so than they need to improve their ability to integrate it with an exercise like this. And this is a step between our sport-specific training where we're actually working on the throwing and our exercises on the table. The sooner you can get an athlete on their feet, closer to the positions they're in the sport, and then closer to the contractile types that they have to go through in the sport, the better. The only problem here is it's very difficult to do maximal end range external rotation strengthening, which the infraspinatus and teres minor have to control for compression of the humeral head and depression of the humeral head, or they have to control an anterior superior migration by compressing and depressing. So we're going to have him go through it isotonically, where he's going through the exercise now. Come up on that toe, straighten that back leg out. Now he's going to go through here. And what you see is that thing starts bouncing around quite a bit. And so he may have to contract his rotator cuff at various times during the exercise. Now, if I want to combine the two, don't want to lose that positioning. So if I want to combine the two, he comes into maximal ER, boom, hold, don't extend through the spine, rotate. You see just how difficult this is. I give him a perturbation while he starts to lose positioning. So he's got to come up here, come back, go through the exercise a couple times, come all the way to max ER, rotate your chest, don't shrug, give him a little bit of perturbation, unpredictable variability. He's got to contract all components of the cuff and the shoulder stabilizers in order to withstand that load. So where I work on the table with a lot of inhibition for the deltoid, where I'm trying to turn off the muscles that are compressing and elevating the humerus in the socket, here I've got to teach them all to contract in a way in which is closer to how they're going to have to do it when they throw. And then I can add some load and resistance. If you have 1 pound little weight here, that's better to start with than 2.5. And then what I do is I have to teach the athlete how to utilize their arm in the throwing motion which is ultimately going to be the most specific, most intense, and then ultimately the most beneficial rotator cuff training exercise for the overhead throwing athlete. But here's an easy progression that can be done after an athlete has progressed from their on-table exercises, where once again they're trying to improve the magnitude of force that the rotator cuff can produce. Once we've accomplished that goal therapeutically in the clinical setting, we have to move towards the performance setting. We have to teach those muscles to work in concert with the other muscles of the shoulder. So thank you guys for staying tuned, watching this video. If you've made it all the way to this point, make sure to hit subscribe and hit the thumbs up. We're going to be producing a ton of content like this. We want to give you guys as much valuable content as possible, and I don't want you guys to miss it. So make sure to hit the subscribe button, and we'll see you in the next video.